There is a quiet fortress we each learn to build. Its walls are made of decisions made alone, of silent burdens carried without complaint, of the quiet pride in being the one who needs no one. From the outside, it looks like strength, it looks like integrity. It is the portrait of the individual. Perfectly self-contained, but inside the fortress the air is still. The echoes of your own footsteps are the only company you keep. This is the story of that solitude. It is not an indictment of strength, but an exploration of a particular kind of silence, the silence that grows between a person and the world when they believe that to ask, to line, to need is to fail. This is the unmapped territory of the always capable, the eternally resilient. This is the dark side of constant self-reliance. It begins not with a shout, but with a silence, a quiet conclusion drawn in the mind of a child. Perhaps it was the time they fell and scraped a knee, and the comfort they expected was too busy, too distracted, or simply not attuned to the frequency of that particular hurt. The tears dried on their own, the sting faded, and a first fundament lesson was learned. The most reliable solace is the one you provide yourself. This is the laying of the first stone, an instinct born not of malice but of necessity. The world for a moment proved unstable, an emotional tremor, and the young psyche, an ingenious architect, begins drafting blueprints for a structure that can withstand any future quake. It builds an inner citadel. The praise soon follows. Look how independent you are, so capable for your age. You never cause any trouble. These words are the mortar between the stones. They reinforce the behavior, coating the defensive structure in the gleaming varnish of social approval. What began as a strategy for emotional survival is now mistaken for identity. It becomes a point of pride. The fortress, initially a refuge, starts to become a home, and then a prison of their own making. The architecture is one of impeccable control. There is a place for everything. Emotions are sorted and filed away, not as experiences to be shared, but as data points to be managed. Needs are assessed for their legitimacy, often found wanting and dismissed as indulgences. The internal dialogue is one of quiet, relentless competence. I can handle this. It is easier if I do it myself. I don't want to be a burden. This is not the chaotic struggle of someone who is drowning. This is the disciplined, weary tread of someone who has learned to live underwater. They have grown gills for an environment that was not meant to sustain human life. They function, they excel. Even, but the cost is a certain stillness, a lack of osmotic exchange with the world outside the walls. The world outside only sees the formidable, finished facade, the colleague who never misses a deadline, who volunteers for the extra project, the friend who remembers everyone's birthday, who offers a shoulder to cry on, but whose own eyes remain dry. Their own stories untold. They are the rock against which others break their waves. Rock does not feel the sun, it only endures it. There is a profound loneliness in this, but it is a loneliness that wears the mask of serenity. It is the quiet of a library after hours. All the knowledge is there, all the resources, but there is no one to discuss them with. The thoughts echo in the vast ordered space. The self becomes both the keeper and the sole inhabitant. This isolation is not a physical one. They can be in a crowded room, at a family dinner, in the warmth of a lover's embrace. The separation is psychological, a pain of one way glass through which they observe the messy, nighty, interdependent world. They see the squalls of emotion, the requests for help, the shared vulnerabilities, and they feel sense of superiority, yes, but also a deep, unutterable confusion. How do they do that? How do they just ask? The need for others begins to feel not like a natural human impulse, but like a design flaw, a weakness to be engineered out of the system. Connection becomes a calculated risk. The potential reward of being understood is meticulously weighed against the catastrophic probability of being let down, of being disappointed, or worse, of being seen as incapable. The calculus always favors the status quo. The drawbridge remains raised. And so the architecture of solitude is perfected. It is strong, it is elegant, it is a monument to the human will to protect itself, but a monument is a cold thing to live in. The walls that keep out the storm also block the sun. the foundations that provide stability are sunk deep into earth that has never been turned, never been fertile. Everything is orderly, nothing grows. The self-reliant one stands at the center of their own creation, running a hand along the smooth, cold stone. They have proven they can survive anything, but a question begins to form, faint as a hairline crack in the perfection, a whisper from a part of the self that the architect tried to wall off. Is this all there is to a life, merely to be secure, to be safe? The silence that answers is the same silence in which it all began. It is a burden that never touches the ground. It is carried in the space between thoughts, in the constant low hum of mental processing that accompanies every waking hour. This is the invisible load of the self-reliant, the ceaseless internal management of a life determined to be a one-person operation. There are no assistants, no deputies. Mind becomes the permanent headquarters, the logistics center, the emergency response team, and the long-term planning committee, all functioning simultaneously within a single skull. The day begins not with the gentle dawn of consciousness, but with the immediate click of a mental switch. The to-do list, already written in the mind the night before, begins to scroll, but it is more than a list. It is a complex web of dependencies, contingencies, and potential failures that must be anticipated and neutralized. What if the train is late? Backup route is mentally mapped. What if the client meeting turns difficult? 3. Separate argumentative strategies are pre-rehearsed. What if a colleague fails to deliver? The task is internally pre-completed, just in case. This is not efficiency, it is a form of psychic hypervigilance, a relentless effort to control the uncontrollable flow of life itself. Every decision, no matter how small, becomes a solo expedition. From the brand of coffee to buy to the strategic direction of a career, the cognitive burden is not shared. There is no sounding board, no trusted confidant to offer a second opinion. The internal dialogue is a closed loop. I'll just figure it out. And so they do, over and over again, until the act of deciding becomes a source of deep, chronic fatigue. This is the weight of the perpetual problem solver, whose mind never enters a state of rest because it is the only tool they allow themselves to use. Emotions are treated not as weather to be experienced, but as data points to be analyzed and filed. A surge of anxiety is not a signal to seek comfort, but a puzzle to be solved alone. What is the root cause? What deficiency in my planning does this reveal? Feeling of sadness is not a reason to call a friend, but a personal failure of emotional regulation, a glitch in the system to be debugged in private. The heart's natural language is stripped of its poetry and forced into the sterile syntax of a technical manual. The weight here is the strain of this constant translation, of denying the body and spirit their native tongue. And then there is the physical toll, the somatic whisper of this psychological burden. It is the jaw perpetually tight, even in sleep. It is the shoulders forever braced for an impact that may or may not come. It is the breath that remains shallow, high in the chest, as if preparing to speak, to explain, to defend, but the words are never released. The body becomes a silent, tense ally in this project of total self-containment, holding the line against a world perceived as inherently demanding. They watch others with a kind of bewildered curiosity. They see people delegate tasks, share worries, express needs without a trace of shame. It looks like a form of magic. Reckless and beautiful trust in the universe and in other people. From the outside, it seems chaotic, unstable, but from the inside of the fortress, it also looks light. The self-reliant one feels the profound weight of their own competence, the heavy price of their impeccable control. They have become the sole author, editor, and publisher of their story, and the manuscript is immense, its pages dense with the ink of their solitary efforts. The invisible load is the accumulation of all the breaths not taken, the sighs not released, the tears not shed on another's shoulder. It is the weight of every "I'm fine" spoken when it wasn't true, every "I've got it" when the hands were trembling. It is not the weight of a single crisis, but the weight of 1,000 minor moments shouldered alone. It is the exhausting, noble, and utterly lonely work of being an entire support system for a single human life. The heart in its natural state is a soft, pulsing thing. It is designed to expand and contract, to beat in rhythm with others, to break and to mend, but a heart that has learned the world is unsafe begins to secrete its own protection. Layer by layer, a casing is formed not of stone or steel, but of something more insidious, principle. Independence, a quiet and unassailable dignity. This is the armored heart. It does not announce its defenses, it simply makes ingress impossible. From the outside, this armor can look like strength. It is the calm in a crisis, the level head when others are losing theirs. It is the person who offers sound advice but never seems to need any. They become a sanctuary for others, a steady presence in the storm. But a sanctuary has no windows. You cannot see out from the inside. The one who provides this stability is often standing in the still, cold center of their own isolation, watching the rain fall on everyone else. Intimacy becomes a calculated risk, a threat to the structural integrity of a carefully built life. Vulnerability is not a bridge to connection, but a chasm of potential failure. To say, "I am struggling," feels not like an invitation for support, but a confession of a fundamental flaw in their core identity. The armor was forged in the belief that to be needed is to be weak and to need is to be a burden, so the heart remains shielded, even especially when it longs to be seen. This creates a peculiar and painful dissonance in relationships. A partner may feel a distance they cannot name, a glass wall between them and the one they love. They offer comfort only to have it politely, deftly deflected. "I'm all right, don't worry about me." The words are kind, but their effect is a gentle push backward. The self-reliant person may feel immense love, but the expression of that love is often through action, through provision, through solving problems, never through the raw, unguarded admission of their own hunger for the same. There is a hidden arrogance in this armor, a silent conviction of one's own superior endurance. They watch others lean, falter, and break, and a part of them thinks, "I would never let myself become so vulnerable." They mistake their own emotional containment for maturity and the messy, open needs of others for a kind of childishness. This is not conscious cruelty, but a necessary fiction. The psyche tells itself to justify the profound loneliness of its own making. The armor is most deceptive because it is so often mistaken for the self. The person forgets what it was like before the protective layers were applied, the spontaneous laugh that came from the belly, the uncalculated tear, the request for a hug made without first performing a complex risk assessment of the other person's mood and capacity. These raw, unmediated responses are slowly edited out of existence. Heart's language becomes formal, polite, and distant. It speaks in memos, not in poetry. And so the armored heart moves through a world of potential connection, forever. Spectator, it sees the tenderness between others, the easy way a hand is held, the head rested on a shoulder, the unashamed request for reassurance. These moments are observed with a mixture of longing and contempt, a deep, aching want paired with a firm internal vow, never. The armor ensures survival, but at the cost of aliveness. It keeps the heart safe, but safety is a poor substitute for touch. The heart, inside its shell, continues to beat its steady, solitary rhythm, a perfect, protected, and deeply lonely drum in the silent dark. No fortress, no matter how well designed, is impervious to the slow, patient pressure of time or the sudden, unexpected tremor. The architecture of solitude, for all its precision, contains a fundamental flaw. It is built to withstand external storms, but it cannot fortify itself against the weariness that grows from within. The fracture point is not a dramatic, explosive failure. It is a quiet internal sound, the sound of a single stone deep in the foundation giving way. It happens on an ordinary Tuesday. There is no catastrophe. The work is done, the bills are paid, the house is clean, and yet, standing in the kitchen holding a cup that is suddenly inexplicably too heavy to lift, the entire structure groans. It is the cumulative weight of all the invisible loads finally exceeding its design tolerance. The mind, that brilliant and tireless commander, simply lays down its arms. It is not a surrender to an external enemy, but a quiet mutiny against its own relentless regime. Or it is a wave of grief, arriving years late for a loss that was never properly mourned. Because mourning required a vulnerability that felt too dangerous at the time. The armor so effective at deflecting daily irritants proves useless against this internal siege. The grief does not ask for permission, it does not respect the rules of containment. It floods the interior, and the solitary figure finds themselves drowning in a sea they themselves have been holding back for a lifetime. Sometimes the fracture is physical, the body, the silent ally that has borne the somatic. Tension for decades stages an intervention, a mysterious pain that will not subside. Immune system that simply quits. The body speaks the truth the mind has refused to acknowledge. It says, I cannot carry this alone anymore. It forces a stillness upon the person, a mandatory ceasefire in their private war of independence. In the quiet of a sick room, the echoes of their own solitude become deafening. The world does not stop. A project at work grows too complex for a single mind. Parent ages and requires care, presenting a problem that cannot be solved with sheer willpower. A child asks a question about fear, and the rehearsed, stoic answers feel like a lie on the tongue. These are not failures of character. They are the universe in its gentle, persistent way, presenting situations that are, by their very nature, communal. They are puzzles that require more than one set of hands to solve. In the wake of the fracture, a terrifying void opens up. All the old strategies, the vigilance, the emotional analysis, the quiet endurance, are revealed to be useless. Tools they have relied on their entire life have broken in their hands. This is a moment of profound psychological disorientation. The map they have used to navigate the world has been shown to be inaccurate. The North Star of their own competence has vanished from the sky. This is not a moment of weakness, but a moment of terrifying clarity. It is the realization that the very thing they built to keep themselves safe, the self-reliance, the emotional containment, the solitary strength, has become the source of their deepest peril. The fortress has become a cage, the armor has become a prison, and the silence they once curated as a sign of control is now a vacuum, threatening to swallow them whole. It is the end of one story and the terrifying, necessary beginning of another. The fracture is not a destruction, it is an opening. After the fracture, there is a silence more profound than any that came before. It is the silence of a strategy retired. The old ways have proven insufficient. The mind, once a bustling command center, now sits quiet, its screens dark, its maps folded. And in that quiet, a new impulse begins to stir. It is not a thought, but a sensation, a deep cellular memory of a different way to be. It begins with a simple, almost heretical question. What if I didn't have to do this alone? The thought itself feels like a betrayal, a surrender to the psyche that has equated asking with failing. The mere contemplation of reaching out feels like the dissolution. The self, the hand trained to build and to carry, trembles at the thought of being empty, of being open. This is not a simple act of request. It is an act of profound existential courage. It is the deliberate dismantling of one's own identity, stone by stone. The first attempt is often clumsy, a whisper that cracks in the middle, a text message typed and deleted 3 times, a half-formed sentence offered to a partner trailing off into nothing. It feels like speaking a foreign language with a heavy, awkward accent. The words "I need help" do not want to form in the mouth. They feel like a confession of a crime. The physiology of it is a shock. The heart hammers not from exertion, but from the terror of exposure. It is the vulnerability of stepping out from behind the fortress wall unarmed into the open field. And then the waiting, the agonizing seconds after the request is made. This is the moment where the old story screams its warning. See, this is a mistake. Burden, you have shown your weakness. Now you will be rejected. Now you will be seen. The entire body braces for the impact of disappointment, for the confirmation of its deepest, oldest fears. But sometimes the response does not come as a rejection. Sometimes it comes as a simple okay, a nod, the taking of a bag, the making of a cup of tea, a listening. That does not try to fix, but simply to receive. In that moment, a new neural pathway, faint and overgrown from disuse, begins to fire. It carries a new message: I am still here. I have not been annihilated by my need. This is the discovery of interdependence, the vast and fertile middle ground between. The punishing polarity of total independence and total dependence. It is the understanding that a bridge requires two pillars to stand, and that the space between them is not a void but a connection. It is the recognition that strength is not a finite resource to be hoarded, but a current that can flow between people. To give is a kind of strength, but to receive, to truly allow another's strength to flow into you, requires a different, more vulnerable kind of power altogether. It starts with small things, delegating a task and accepting that it will be done differently, not better or worse, sharing a worry not to have it solved, but simply to have it witnessed, admitting I don't know. Each time it is a practice, each time the armor does not shatter but softens, becoming more like a membrane than a shield. It allows for osmosis, the slow, gentle exchange of strength and vulnerability, of giving and receiving. The outstretched hand is the most courageous architecture of all. It does not build a wall, it builds a bridge, and the person standing in the middle of that bridge, feeling its slight sway, is no longer the solitary forest dweller, nor are they a dependent child. They are something new, something more fluid and more resilient. They are learning that to be held is not to be trapped, and that to need is not a flaw, but the very thing that makes connection possible. The hand is empty, open, and for the first time, truly ready to be met. The new strength does not announce itself with fanfare. It is not a thing to be displayed or measured. It is a quiet internal recalibration, a shift from stone to water. The old strength was about resistance, holding the line, bearing the weight, deflecting the impact. The new strength is about flow. It is the resilience of the willow that bends in storm rather than the oak that risks splintering. It knows when to stand firm, and it knows when to yield. This is a softer strength, one that has made peace with its own permeability. The fortress is not demolished, left as a ruin to be pitied. That would be just another form of violence against the self. Instead, its gates are unlocked, its walls now contain garden, not just a garrison. There are still private rooms, spaces for quiet contemplation and self-reliance, but they are no longer the entire structure. Windows have been opened, allowing light and air to circulate. The drawbridge is down, not as a permanent invitation to all, but as a choice, a conscious decision that connection is sometimes worth the risk. There is a new language being learned. It is the vocabulary of nuance, of the conditional mood. It holds space for I can usually handle this, but today I can't without self recrimination. It allows for I value my independence, and I also value your support. Binary thinking that once divided the world into the strong and the weak, the capable and the needy, begins to dissolve. In its place emerges a spectrum of human experience, where needing and giving are not opposites, but partners in a delicate, eternal dance. This softer strength is, paradoxically, far more durable. The old strength was brittle. It had to be perfect or it risked total failure. It was a performance that required constant, exhausting upkeep. The new strength is flexible. It can adapt. It can admit a mistake without the entire identity collapsing. It can experience a failure and understand it as a moment in time, not a definition of the self. It has a sense of humor about its own limits. It can say, well, I certainly overestimated my abilities there, and the world does not. And the body unclenches. The breath, held high in the chest for so long, is finally allowed to sink to fill the belly. The jaw loosens. The shoulders drop from their perpetual state of alert. There's a physical sensation of laying down a weight that one did not even know they were carrying. It is the feeling of a constant, low-grade alarm being switched off. After a lifetime, the silence that follows is not the silence of solitude, but the silence of poison. Relationships are renegotiated on this new terrain. There is a discovery of the profound intimacy that exists in mutual reliance. It is the quiet comfort of knowing that you do not have to be the strong one all the time. It is the safety of allowing someone to see you in a moment of uncertainty, and finding that their regard for you does not diminish, but deepens. You are no longer a monument to be admired from a distance, but a person to be met in all your complex, fluctuating humanity. This is not an arrival at a final destination. It is a new way of traveling. Some days the old reflexes return, the gates want to slam shut, the armor begins to form. But now, there is an awareness, a choice. The path of solitude is a known quantity, a familiar. Lonely road, the path of connection is wilder, more unpredictable, and more alive. Softer strength is the courage to choose the wildness again and again. It is the understanding that a heart, when it is open and unarmored, is not a problem to be solved. It is a capacity to be filled. It is not a fortress, but a home.